What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Midnight Manor at Fantastic Fest 2025. This is your Collider interview with the team behind Black Phone 2. Oh my, congratulations. I'm so happy for both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to be covering your movie nonstop up to release and probably through it. We obviously cannot talk spoilers today, but I got to tell you, I am bursting at the seams to discuss some of these details.
Let's go.
Not just yet. Eventually that time will come. We're going to play it safe right now. I have a whole bunch of follow-ups from our last chat, which happened before I even saw the movie. I think all I had seen at that point was the first trailer. And the first thing on my list is what you were telling me about Joe Hill's idea for the Black Phone 2. And specifically what you said was that you were looking for an idea and Joe emailed you a pitch. Some of it you didn't respond to, but there was an idea within that email that you thought was fantastic that you had never heard of. So now I want to know, in the movie I just saw, what is that specific idea?
There's another central tenet to when he called me up, because he called me and then I said, you got to talk to Scott. And he emailed Scott because he wanted it to all come out. Just like, okay, here's all my ideas. But that core idea was... he was just like, I have the dumbest idea. And I'm like, we love dumb ideas. Let's go. What's the dumb idea? And he goes, a phone rings and Finney answers and it's the grabber calling him from hell. And he had this additional thing on it that we've kind of done where, now the mask is his face in hell, that there is no grabber without the mask, that is who he is. And we were just like, fuck yes.
Yeah, again, there's certain layers of that I want to blab about and celebrate right now because I thought it was so smart, such a smart way to expand the story. Can't do it just yet. One thing I did want to follow up on, I hope I'm remembering this correctly from the Q&A last night, was the role of their mother written for Anna Laurie? Or was that a different role?
She was the person I had in mind all the time, but we try not to write for somebody specifically or to do so very loosely. Yeah. So as soon as it came up, I thought she'd be perfect for it, but I certainly, Cargill didn't know her at that time, I don't think.
Oh no, I did. We worked on Valentine together.
Oh, that's of course, yes, that's right. So, but I always had her in mind and hoped that she would do it.
Just makes me really happy to see her have the 1-2 punch this year of this and Final Destination.
She's fantastic.
She's good friends, close friends with Scott's wife. And so we've worked with her in the past, just hung out with her numerous times. And so when he's like, I want Anna for this, I was like, of course, yes.
So good. Sign me up for anything she's in always.
And then she really, really looks like Maddie. So, I mean, they look like mother and daughter in a way that when Scott pointed it out, I was like, oh man, that's genius. Like that was Scott's stroke of genius with the casting.
Well, she also has to play a character with a pretty big age gap, you know, in the opening. And Anna can look so young. In the opening, she does look like she's 18 or 19 years old.
Oh, 100%.
And then she needs to play a mother many years later in the movie. When you see her, I don't think those are spoilers. But that was also something that there aren't a lot of actresses that can fit the bill there.
Yeah, I had that actual discussion with somebody else last night about how impressed we were about that.
You see her next to Jeremy Davies, and it's like, yeah, I see it. Even though you just saw her 20 minutes ago in a phone booth looking like you said, 19 years old.
No visual effects on her at all. That's just, she can just look that different.
Yeah, that's also a road I could go down and discuss for quite a while.
Yeah. You know what? Fuck her for being so genetically awesome. Yeah.
You said it, not me. Here's one other thing I really wanted to follow up on with both of you that you had brought up in our last conversation. You said that the screenplay that you guys wrote was very confusing to a lot of people. Well, I was revisiting the interview, having seen the movie, and I'm like, well, what was confusing? What
was confusing was the fact that you were jumping back and forth so much between the dream world and reality. And so every time you got a slug line that says, dream world, Super 8, you're describing, and it goes back and forth so many times. And the structure of the narrative is also kind of all over the place. You're getting pieces of information from the history in random ways. So when you read it all the way through, it's very difficult to take it in on the page. And even when we were in prep, I would get lost on things. Sometimes I'd be like, no, wait a minute. This scene, does this take place before that scene or after that scene? It was a bit of a puzzle. And I remember my production designer, Patty Podesta, about 3 weeks before we finished shooting, she just said, Scott, I got to just tell you, I think you're the only person who understands the movie you're making. because it was technically so complicated. Yeah. And I would tell people what to do, and everybody did it, but it was a hard movie on the page to grasp what is visually represented on the screen.
Yeah, you're talking about a movie in which we were operating with 3 very different cameras to capture very different parts of the movie that to visually represent it. And so sometimes you'd be like, okay, wait, where in the movie are we? Which camera are we using? Which film stock are we using? Like, what is, and there's so many moving parts. Like, it's one of those things that there's a handful of people on the planet that could make that work, and Scott is one of them.
It's wild to me to hear you explain it that way, because as presented in the finished film, it's pretty seamless. So I'll dig into the Super 8 of it all now. Can you tell me a little bit about figuring out the right visual language so that I don't know if you thought about it this way, but I certainly did. It not only feels like an expansion of how it's used in the first film, but it also almost feels like another step from Sinister to Black Phone to Black Phone to Black Phone 2.
It's definitely an evolution of those films stylistically, and rather than drawing on other films, this is the first time I've sort of drawn on my own past visual style and try to evolve it into something that I haven't seen before. I have not seen a movie in a theater, or maybe ever, that has this much Super 8 material in it. And Super 8 is really dangerous feeling, and it's actually dangerous to work with. It's very volatile. It underexposes, it overexposes, it flutters in the gate. The aberrations are part of the beauty of it and the dangerousness of it.
An entire reel will just be lost because it won't develop properly.
Yeah. So there was one scene we had.
Are you saying that as a hypothetical? Oh,
no, that really happened.
Oh no! I'm not saying that as a hypothetical.
My heart started to sink as you said it, and I'm like, no, pull it back. We
have one scene in the movie we had to reshoot 3 times because the Super 8 was so volatile. But it was worth it, because it's hard these days to go into a cinema and have a visual experience where you're looking at something that you don't feel like you've seen before. It just doesn't look like other movies. And that's very exciting for me as a film viewer when that happens. And I felt like part of the excitement of the movie was going to be the audio visual power of the medium itself, and that could be used to really be a storytelling device separating the dream world from reality.
So it is very, Super 8 always feels very dangerous. It ups the tension. But can you tell me a little bit about maybe weaving that way of filming into Gwen's journey thematically so that it's also evolving in a way that supports where you want to take her in the story?
One of the decisions, that's actually a script decision that we made, because I remember calling Cargill one time when we were sort of playing with some of the horror scenes early on, and I said, I think that maybe we should have all of the terror of this movie in this dream world. And that was a hard decision to make, and Cargill immediately was like, I thought that all along. And I was like, okay, well, I was slow to the process, but making that decision meant that I really did have to create worlds here. And for Gwen, she is this character with these ethereal gifts, and to be able to give her a visual space where when you see it in her, that you're inside of her own mind to a degree, that you're inside a space that she occupies mentally and spiritually. And that became very challenging for me, because every time that we were in there, I needed it to feel, not be intellectual idea, but need to feel like her, and need to feel like her world. And the seamlessness is hopefully that you don't have to experience it intellectually, you just experience it viscerally, and it makes sense to you as it's happening.
Oh, without a doubt, can confirm that. I have so many follow-up questions. One of the first ones that crossed my mind, just because you emphasized dream world, and obviously a lot of folks out there are comparing this movie to Nightmare on Elm Street, which I think is very applicable, and I like it. But I'm curious for the two of you, how do you approach, I guess, embracing that kind of comparison rather than pushing it away and trying to force your movie to be something so incredibly unique, but playing with the fact that it's tapping into something that so many people love out there?
There's a phrase I like to use, and I use it quite often, turning into the skid. Sometimes when you're sliding on ice or water, you turn into the skid instead of away from it, and that's how you right the car. And that's what you do with things like this. The minute we realized we're bumping up against material that had been done in movies that we love, we were just like, why try to ignore that and pretend we're something else, and instead just turn into the skid and be like, we love Nightmare on Elm Street, you love Nightmare on Elm Street, we're not going to steal from Wes, but we will do our own variant on this with the rules that we set up in the previous movie. And so it's like any similarities are a good thing for this audience. Audiences love as I was saying in another interview last night, one of the great things about horror audiences is they are so film literate, and they know their movies inside and out and chapter and verse. And so you're not going to pull it over on them and be like, hey, we made a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that you don't recognize. No, they're going to know. So it's like, well, let's go for it. But let's also make sure we honor that material as well by not stealing from it.
I think one of the best things you do is that you do honor it, but you honor it within this really rich world that you two have created with Joe, of course. I wanted to lean into that a little bit because I believe you brought this up at the Q&A last night. Oh, I forget the exact verbiage you used, but something about like overwriting rules or something to that effect.
I overwrite. My other job, I'm a novelist. And so I love to overwrite. And so then Scott's first job when he's rewriting me is cutting out like 6 pages and just being like, let's cut this down to the bone and make it work. But I always like to overwrite with the rules there so that we both know what we're playing with. And then the secret with writing in general is that you then pare that away to exactly the point that the audience understands it, but doesn't ever feel like you're sitting there and giving them a lecture on how the movie works. Because that's always the point at which the movie grinds to a halt, is the point where someone looks in the camera and goes, let me explain dreaming to you. Let me explain the rules of Inception. That's the one criticism of Inception that functions, is that 70% of that movie is explaining the other 30% to you.
I don't have that criticism.
Oh, love the movie, but point is that, and so you're always trying to avoid that. And so I like to overwrite, and then we cut down and get to that point where the audience is like, oh, this is everything I needed to know.
To follow up on that a little, can you each give me an example of a rule that you knew had to be rather explicit in the movie, but then also maybe a rule that you developed that you didn't need to flat out mention in the film, but we could still feel informing the film overall and the world that you're creating?
Yeah, one of the big ones is that, and this is something I mentioned in the Q&A last night, is one of the great things about this story is it's about the kids learning that this is not something happening to them. This is something that is happening within them that's connecting. And so having the phone ring and not having both of them hear it, but only the one who's getting the call, only the one that's mentally reaching out. And so we always had to make sure we knew what that was, because it's not, there is no real phone ringing. It's just the medium with which they are communicating with the dead. And it's that thing that it's how their brain processes it. So yeah, we always were making sure that someone would hear it ringing, but it was never both of them, because this isn't some shared thing. They just both have the same abilities from their mom. And also in that vein, Finn is rejecting it. And so he's not having all the experiences Gwen is having, because Gwen is open to it. And we're seeing two people with the same gifts, and one person trying to shut it down while the other person is being open to it, which is why as she goes through the movie, she starts being able to do things that Finn can do. Because it's not that they have two separate abilities. It's that they both develop them in different ways, and he's not furthering his learning of that while she is. And that's why she, by the end of the movie, would be a much more competent paranormal investigator than her brother would be.
This is the greediest follow-up question, but you explained that, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, I want more. I assume you see the potential in a Black Phone 3, right?
Would anyone want that? I don't know. I mean,
no one's brought that up to me yet.
Yeah, no, that's the first time we've heard it. Like, hey, I hope other people would like that.
Oh, I want to see you expand. And the two of them are just exceptional. I thought they were phenomenal in the first film, but when you see what they're able to do at a different stage of life here, it really is just something extra special. So I would love to see them continue in these roles as well. But leaning into them in particular. Can you maybe tell me something that you saw Madeleine and Mason do on this set that, maybe made the two of you stop and go like, I thought I knew how powerful this scene could be, but you two just took it to another level?
I mean, the thing about the two of them is that they are so comfortable around each other, know each other so well, that it was much more about feeling continually surprised at how easily they stepped into a scene and felt like brother and sister and felt like they had real history, because they do, and they've known each other for years now, since the first film. For me, it's the more, emotional moments when they're leaning on each other. I think that for me, the greatest performance moment that Maddie has is actually after the first nightmare that she has. And when she wakes up and she is really crying and she is really distraught, and she had to get herself into a very dark place, which is painful for her as an actress. Some people can do that on command and it doesn't affect them. It really affects her. So when I ask her to do something like that, that is, I'm aware of that I'm extracting real emotional energy and power from a person, for the sake of the movie. And the way that in that scene, it, to a lesser degree in the basement when she wakes up, but when she wakes up in the dorm, the way Mason is with her and the way he is calming her and talking to her and telling her she's okay. But then, when she sort of folds in on him, the fear then sets in. All that was instinctive for them. That was something that just naturally would step in and do. And they both, I think, respect the other person's skill, and they both just understand that relationship and what it is. So it doesn't take a lot of work to get that dynamic on screen.
One of the great things about the kids is on the very first movie, they all just kind of fell in love with one another and started a text group. And so they just have been texting as a group. All the kids on Black Phone just have been hanging out online together for several years, and they are super close friends. So when they would be on set, oftentimes when they would be wrapped for the day, they would go get out of hair and makeup and they'd be ready to go home. And then they would just stick around on set because their argument was, I'm just going to be sitting at home texting the boys anyway, so why don't I just hang out and be on set with everyone? And so they would just all hang out together and run around playing together, and that energy comes across in the movie. You get that these kids have a real connection.
That really something else together, all of them. I was so impressed by that. I do have to take a minute to highlight the grabber. Here's another follow-up that I had, because last we were talking, you very lightly mentioned that the look of the grabber in this movie went through a series of concept art until you landed on what we see in the finished film. So can you maybe paint a picture of what the first piece of concept art you saw looked like and how that compares to what he looks like in the finished film?
Boy, that's a good question. I knew that it was going to be I knew the mask was going to have to be affected by the origin of the character story. I think that it got gradually more violent looking. I think that it started. I think that what it started with was a tamer version of what we have in the actual movie, and I think as we continued to work on the movie, and I started to feel some of the visceral power of some of the scenes, I was just like, we have to take this farther. And Ethan was very patient with the makeup effects work and that sort of thing. And it's in the trailer, but like the ripping off of the mask and the seeing his actual countenance under that mask is really the stuff of nightmares, and that was just about progressing and having him get more and more violent until we landed there. That's really what it was.
Looks just absolutely phenomenal. I love that. One of many aspects of the film that I really do love. Obviously, a very hot topic of conversation is the grabber on skates, and I know you've probably been asked about that to death at this point. But one particular thing I'm curious about is, does something like that look scary when you're on set? Like, do you know it's going to work when you're photographing?
Oh no, I was terrified that it would be the dumbest shit ever. We're drawing very unabashedly on a 1983 horror film called Curtains that has a wonderful scene with a masked killer on skates. It's just one scene, but that was the origin of the idea. The problem is I couldn't just put him on skates, and so the most difficult production design element were the grabber's feet. there's nothing we spent more time on, and didn't get it right until very late in the process in post. But the idea is it was that they would be ice encrusted and bloody and something that could slide on ice and all of that. And when we started to get it right, I started to feel like, oh, this is actually actively disturbing in its own right. And so by the time you have the trailer images, I felt confident that it was going to work in the narrative of the movie, but I was also surprised that as soon as people saw it, they liked it. In fact, from the screening last night, my favorite review I've seen so far, my wife sent it to me. It was a 5-star letterbox review that just said, "Hail skating."
I like that. I like that quite a bit. I got to wind down with you. I would be sadder about it, but we get to revisit this movie at New York Comic Con soon enough. I did want to end on one unrelated question, because it just so happens that my next interview here at Fantastic Fest is with Clay. And I know you two are doing Ghost Eaters. So I'm curious, at what point in that process are you at? How far along with that movie are you? And what is it about Maggie in particular that makes you say to yourselves, like, this material is in the perfect hands with her as the writer and director?
There's a great story. So Crooked Highway, our company, has optioned Clay's novel. What happened was Maggie had read that novel a few years ago, and I remember her telling me about it. She reads a lot, but she loved the book. The book was not available. It was owned by another company. I'm not going to mention who, but it was Blumhouse.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, was that my out loud voice? So they put it in turnaround, and I found out what happened is I didn't find out about that, but I was looking one week, I was just sort of surveying all the great horror novels, or the acclaimed horror novels of like the 2020s and, the last 5 to 10 years. And this novel came up quite a bit. I was basing my read quick survey of just ideas. What's the concept of the novel? Is it something that we as producers should look at? And when I saw Ghost Eaters, I was like, oh, this idea is really fantastic. This is a really interesting idea for a movie. So I went to Vince, who runs our company, and said, find out if this is available. Turns out it was in turnaround at Blumhouse. They had decided they optioned it, but weren't going to make a movie out of it. And I said, oh, interesting. And then when I told my wife, Maggie, she's like, that's that book I read. Do you remember? Like, that's incredible. So it was an automatic fit, that she had, and I remember she had tried to get the rights, but they were not available. And so through a different angle, I was trying to get the rights, and then just when we got them, she was the natural filmmaker to do it.
And Maggie is just such an incredible talent. And it's, quite literally, they fell in love while they were developing a project together that we were all working on. And it was just one of those things where we went from being work buddies to all of a sudden, oh, she's family now. And she has shot second unit on several of our films. She's a very important component to why our films are what they are. And so we've been trying very hard to get her first main feature, theatrical feature off the ground. And, Hollywood being where it is right now, it's been so hard. And so finally we're in that space where other people are waking up and going, oh, Maggie Levin is brilliant. And we're like, we know, it's about time you recognize
now
it.
She's in a place where I think she's going to have like 3 greenlit movies all at once.
Before us.
Yeah.
I like hearing that. I want that for her.
Champagne problem.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like that problem quite a bit. And just because I didn't bring up the other element of your family that is involved in Black Phone 2, your son, that score is exceptional. Exceptional.
It's truly brilliant score.
I am so impressed. I got to let you both go, but I'm going to say huge, huge, huge. Congratulations
thank you so
on
much.
Black Phone 2. Enjoy celebrating from now all the way through the release and beyond.
Thank you so much. That was great.
You.